Let me quickly move to the last part of my talk, maybe just about another 5 or 6 minutes. And yeah, I'll finish up soon. So let me talk to you why I would present this talk in this way and why I think it's important for this larger question of what's the use of an American in the Japanese Academy. And I want to talk about trajectories and teaching. Now, as I think about my own career, I think about this movement that I have made, okay? So this is how I would plot it or to explain it to someone. So I would say here on this axis is the approach that I take, the emphasis, the approach. A very heavily empirical approach, conceptual approach, theory or epistemology, and maybe ontology. Now, along this is the view of Japan. Japan as an empirical other, just a case study. Or Japan as an epistemic or ontological other. Does that difference make sense? I think stage 1 is where I was very early. Japan is just an example that I can use. Stage 2, conceptual example. Stage 3, as I started going deeper into theory, now I'm thinking that Japan is kind of, Japanese ideas are very much challenging the very foundation of how I think about my field. And then stage 4 was actually moving completely into that space and reinterpreting all of this. Now here's another view. These stages were very much comparative education in the Anglo-American style. Stage 3, historical comparative sociology. And stage 4 were philosophy, in a sense.
Welcome to philosophy.
どうもありがとう先生。So, but it's not so important that this is my trajectory, but I think that there's a larger point here about how foreign scholars, what happens to them when they come to Japan. So, in very broad terms, in this place, Japan, and here I'm trying to explain this again just in case you don't quite have it yet. Japan as a case inside the universal categories of Western academia. Japan just needs to fit itself in there. And then in this space, Japan as a place to remake the categories of Western academy. Now, the closest I could come to describing this in a very simple way is to think about a meteor. What's a meteor in Japanese? 宇宙からの石隕石のようなカリアじゃないではないかと。それは entering the atmosphere で2つの可能性。1つはもう光ってる、わー、light, shooting star, wow. もう一つは completely break up, just disappear into nothing, right? So, now, okay, I'm not going to speak, just because of time, I'm going to skip the next two things, but we can definitely talk about this in question and answer. But some of the dangers with this project, So one of the dangers could be, isn't this orientalizing? But another danger could be, once I move, isn't it occidentalizing? Okay? And I'm just going to speak about occidentalizing here. Why I think I'm not doing that is that I also highlight many of the negative dimensions. So how is this project different than Nihon Jinron style discourse. One of them is, I think I highlight the negative dimensions. Japan is not a paradise. Japan is a place that has different ways of thinking about social realities and education, and we can learn from those. And I also think that I'm not just challenging, my goal is not just to challenge Western scholars, but also to challenge Japanese scholars to engage in that discourse. So if you look on the packet on page, again, I'm just kind of advertising for if you want to read any of these in more detail. Page 25, is that I was asked to contribute, I was very happy to be asked to contribute a chapter to a volume that Nihon Kyoiku Shakaigaku is producing. Their first, I think one of the first English language volume. It's called Education in Japan in a Global Age. And I submitted a chapter that asked them to rethink the educational research agenda for Japan, or for the sociology of Japan in a global era. How can we rethink the main premise of Japanese sociology of education in order to make it more interesting, relevant, or connected to the world? But what I want to point out is that I'm making a critique also of Japanese scholarship as it exists. So it's not simply that I want to be here and critique Western ideas. I also want to critique ideas that we have. And why is that important? Because I think really where I think we should be sitting as a foreign scholar is right here on this crossroads, right here. So descending down like this meteor, but then making sure that we come back in order to create this discourse across disciplines, so interdisciplinary, and across the categories that exist here and the categories that exist here. So I'm trying to sit here and develop a research program that will allow both sides to interact in that way. And this is drawn up just because, just like the time paper, I hope that out of those dialogues we can create kind of alternative views of empirical realities or conceptual realities. I'm afraid that this discussion will be stuck down here only in the realm of philosophy. I want to bring it up into a more visible place. Okay, I'm really out of time. So I'm also actually going to skip the, let me just speak 1 minute about the teaching. Because that's the research part. That's my trajectory, and that's where I think that I want to create space inside Japan, the position that I've been given inside Japan. And I think it contributes to both sides. Now, another role for us as scholars is, of course, our research, but of course our teaching. So what I'm trying to do in my teaching as well is to also create that dialogic space. And I've put my syllabus for this year's Enshu inside the packet as well, so if you're interested. And this syllabus, if you look, for example, week 2 and week 3, it asks the students to think about Japanese education and thought in a global era. Week 3 asks them, what kind of scholar will you be? Then weeks 4 through week 6 are asking them to revisit some people who have written about these key differences in thought that exist. So one of the articles that we read is Imanishi Kinji's view of how he changed primatology. Very interesting. And then a quite funny article called Sushi Science and Hamburger Science. Week 6, okay? Now, I don't want to leave my students I want to put them in the middle, but I want to give them a chance to then think through how to build some apparatus that can allow us to actually have this discussion at a deep level. And right now, I think one of the best possibilities is this idea of axial age, originally comes from Karl Jaspers, But this is really picking up in the Western academic conversation, this axial age idea. I won't go into it very much, but it came on after World War II to try to think about how can we have a cross-civilizational dialogue in the fields of philosophy and sociology. And interestingly, it produced a huge amount of work on Japan by foreign scholars. Samuel Eisenstadt wrote Japanese Civilization. A scholar named Johan Arneson wrote Social Theory in the Japanese Experience. And another scholar in University of Berkeley wrote Imagining Japan. So thinking about the Japanese tradition through this lens of axial civilizations. And I guess the key to my teaching, and this is what the key point that I'm trying to emphasize, is that this dialogue itself that occurred between axial age, Japanese ideas, foreign scholars, I want that to be the text. I want them to understand the structure of that dialogue itself, rather than a particular thinker saying he has the best idea. I want them to see some of the promises and also some of the perils if we go too far down this road of difference. So I'm trying to place them in that uncomfortable in-between space by the end of the class. Oh, and this is just saying that there's actually, I show this to my students. Have any of you heard of the Mannen Doke? So this is by the founder of Toshiba, Tanaka Hisashige. He built this clock in 1851. He built it in Kyoto. And what it shows is all the different time systems that were being used. And he matched them all onto one apparatus. So my point is, what type of intellectual structure can hold fundamentally different conceptions of social reality? And how can they be done in ways that coexist and enrich each other? I think this is what I'm trying to hope to build in that sense. Okay, and I'll finish there. But yeah, let's just, maybe I just finish there. No, let me say one last slide. What is the use of an American? Shallow. Shallow use of an American is using them for global rankings, English classes, proofreading. A deep is the development of new perspectives or approaches. And then what challenges does this moment, this is a very historic moment, create for Japanese Academy? This is such a historic moment, don't you think? I don't think there's ever been foreigners in the top universities. There's always like a scholar who comes for a little while, or maybe spoke to D.T. Suzuki or other people, scholars here and there, but no one has actually had the time or the interaction to do this. This is such a historic moment. So what are we going to do with it, right? So I think that there's peril. One thing that can go wrong is that simply there just becomes the next wave of erasure of differences. Which means that I worry, honestly I worry, there's no other foreign professors in here, but I worry that they are at stage 1 or stage 2 and just sonomama explain Japan. And then it's quite bad because it's internally driven, right? Now this is a Kyoto University professor saying it's like this. So it's like we have to engage them in dialogue, because I think that most of them would like to become meteor if they have the chance, but maybe they don't have the chance, like meeting Kariya sensei or meeting other scholars who can teach them new perspectives. And then the promise, of course, is that it's a chance to challenge the Western assumptions. I mean, again, like I write these types of things and people say, are they really talking about things like that in Japan? And I say, yeah, you can find texts like that in Japan. So I think that's a really promise that we can use with this moment. And so the point is that really we have to have this double transfer. double transfer back and forth. So we got to sit right in the middle, or at least I do. Yeah. Okay. And final thoughts. Maybe you were most worried about this one. Of course, I will help you with proofreading. Don't worry. Don't worry. But of course, as a form of dialogue, right? Or setting up international plays is great. It's the space I want to see created, right? Looking ahead, I just think that we can do more to include China and Taiwan or a non-Western other that will absolutely enrich, or Korea, that will enrich this kind of binary dichotomy. And I would like to connect to other projects. For example, Watanabe Sensei and I, we had a really good talk, like the things in lifelong learning that she recognizes. I know how they can fit into this discussion. So it would be so wonderful if we could create that collaboration. And the other thing is, if you have students in any koza who's interested or wants to have a global jinzai no future, you're welcome to send them to my enshu. Because I want to have that my enshu as a place that people can come together around that. So I'm very happy if you send them over. I won't talk about that because we're out of time, but I would just say, kokusai ka kekkyoku is not to worry. For me, it's actually contemplation and a mutual collaboration. So 考えてるだけ。はい。ありがとうございます。はい